Ruling Elder Dave grew up on the mission field. So he's going to speak to us about missions today. Before he does, we have a short video.
Asked in an interview, "Sir, what do you remember when you got the happiest in life?" The billionaire said, "I have gone through 4 stages of happiness in life, and I finally understood the meaning of true happiness. The first stage was to accumulate wealth and resources, but at this stage I didn't get the happiness I wanted. Then came the second stage of collecting valuables and items, but I realized that the effect of this thing is also temporary. Then came the third stage of getting a big project. That was when I had 95% of the diesel supply in India and Africa. But even here I did not get the happiness that I had imagined. The fourth stage was when a friend of mine asked me to buy wheelchairs for some 200 disabled children. At the behest of my friend, I immediately bought the wheelchairs. But the friend insisted that I go with him and hand over the wheelchairs to the children. I gave these children the wheelchairs with my own hands. I saw a strange glow of happiness on the faces of these children. I saw them all sitting in wheelchairs having fun. I felt real happiness inside me. When I decided to leave, one of the kids grabbed my leg. I leaned over and asked the child, "Do you need anything else?" The answer this kid gave me completely changed my outlook towards life. This child said, "I want to remember your face so that when I meet you in heaven I can recognize you and thank you once again."
So we started out by singing, am I on? All right. In this time of desperation, in the time of the broken generation, it was the first hymn we sung. And I was thinking, Matthew 28:16-20 was written with the same thoughts in mind. It's a broken generation, it's a time of desperation, and yet Matthew wrote this, or God said this. So why don't we read that verse, actually, to start with. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority is in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." Notice that's not names, it's name of the Trinity. "Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." So I come from a missionary background. My folks went to Wheaton College at a time, a long time ago, when the emphasis was on missions. Billy Graham was in their class, so you can imagine what the emphasis was at that time. So they were in the mission field, Eritrea, on the east coast of Africa for 18-some years, after which time the whole country fell apart into war. And I was there for 10. So you can kind of tell what that did to families as well, being on the mission field. So foreign missionaries are commissioned people that have a unique task to bring the gospel to nations. And of course we have home missionaries as well. And they're people who bring the gospel, start churches in areas where there is no church, no gospel being preached. But we're all commissioned, all of us. We're all ambassadors of Christ in various ways, not on the foreign mission field, any of us here today, but we're all commissioned and we're all ambassadors. Parents with their children are ambassadors. Employers doing the right thing for their employees and running an honest business are ambassadors. A car mechanic not cheating in his job and doing the job right and knowing his business in this computer age That's an ambassador of Christ. A farmer who's a good steward of his land is an ambassador of Christ. And so we're all ambassadors of Christ, all of us. I have a unique blessing to be an ambassador of Christ in a Christian school where I can present the gospel every day. So, for example, a student came up to me the other day and said, you know, that book you made us read over the summer, Screwtape Letters, really made me think about my faith and my life and how I live for God. So I have a blessing that way that other people don't. But, you know, we all do. I had a friend who worked for a construction company, and everybody there was pretty secular. The stories were pretty raw. The exploits in the evenings, they told each other, and they kind of made fun of him. But you know, one fellow got into real trouble in his marriage, and guess who he came to as an ambassador of Christ in that field. So foreign missionaries are unique in that they travel from their homeland to a place that is so culturally different that it can come as a shock. It can be really shocking. My first night in where we didn't have electricity or running water, I was 3, and somebody came in the black night screaming, and there were people when I looked out the window, and I couldn't really see what was going on, but he wasn't shoplifting. He was running kerosene across the border so he didn't have to pay tax, and the police threw a grenade at him. So that was my first experience on the mission field. But I've never quite appreciated until I was an adult of what my parents had to go through, having come from Long Island, New York City, and going to this place, no running water, electricity, and things being so culturally different. As a kid, you don't appreciate that because what's there is your normal, but it certainly wasn't normal for them. The food is different. My father-in-law was a missionary to the mountain people in Taiwan, and he was a rough, tough guy from South Philly. Is there any other kind? And but he would eat anything. But he drew the line one morning in this mountain village when, since he was the honored guest, they gave him a bowl of rice for breakfast with a live slug on it. You know, that was where he drew the line. But I can imagine, you know, if one of them came over here as a Christian in Lancaster County, that they might draw the line at Scrapple. I don't know. So let's look at some verses here about this, about being, no matter where you are, you're an ambassador. Ambassadors, back in the 1950s when I was a lad, they had the special protection of the United States. We had won World War II, and so there was sort of an aura around you as an American that, you know, people didn't touch you or in negative ways. And so the ambassador had that kind of protection, and they protected you as well in a foreign place. It was nice to know, you know, as a missionary that you kind of had that. The 6th Fleet would pull into port in Massawa, Eritrea, once in a great while, and it's sort of a show of power, you know. So you kind of had that protection. But, you know, as ambassadors for Christ, we have a certain type of protection. We have an authority that's there that protects us. And I'm not talking about saving you from being persecuted, you know, but everything belongs to Christ and is under his control. It does bring up questions, you know. An acquaintance was a missionary down in Haiti about 15 years ago. His family was there, and they were doing great work, and he was killed in a motorcycle accident. He wouldn't have been killed, but for no medical attention at the time. But you're like, why, Lord, did you let that happen? You know, we have questions like that. My folks were missionaries for almost 20 years, and there were very few converts over that 20 years. You know, some of those questions you have are never answered until after the second coming. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's just not answered. Other times you can see, oh, that's why that happened. That missionary was executed by Koreans, and one of the executors was so impressed with the way he died that, you know, the gospel came to Korea, and, you know, the rest is history. You know, so sometimes you can say, other times it's hard. You know, you say, why did that happen? But even one convert over 20 years would be for God's kingdom and worth it. I was well, I always do this, but I have shocked kids when I tell them that the conversion and going to heaven of one homeless person around them is worth more than all the lives of every cute dog and cat in the United States. They're like, what? No. But it's true. One convert. So I wonder how many of us have donated to the Sunday Breakfast Mission down in Wilmington, because homeless people that are addicted in many ways are converted there, and a number of them actually. It's a great thing, and you know, when I had dogs, I used to spend probably $20 a month on them, not more. And I had my limits, but you know, how am I interested in that homeless person, the one I see with that sign that says "homeless, please help," and it's obvious the person has some mental problems, probably drug addictions and stuff. Just remember, that person is a shadow of made in the image of God. And so we need to remember that. So anyway, speaking of shock, you can imagine what these disciples went through in Matthew 28 when they knew that they were supposed to go out and be missionaries to everybody. I mean, it's one thing to talk to the Jews, but the Samaritans, the Romans who were despised and hated, the Samaritans who were despised, they're supposed to go there and do that. Well, they were told to start in Jerusalem and then go to Samaria and then to the whole known world, and it spread pretty quickly, actually. If you take a look at Acts 18, 9 through 11, you will see something there. I think I've skipped a couple. But I have, I'm sorry. So, 18, 9 through 11. And the Lord said to Paul in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking, and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you or harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people." And he stayed there for 1 year and 6 months. That's kind of interesting. That God says, you know, I have people that I have chosen to become Christians around here, Gentiles, Romans, etc. And so I'm sure that was encouragement to him, as an encouragement to us all to know that God has chosen people, even if it's just one person, but that he's chosen people. Today, we are sent, but of course we can also use the internet to send, and I'm going to be speaking about that a little later. But one interesting thing about the times that Paul lived in and stuff is that the people were persecuted. You know, it's a time of desperation. The Christians were persecuted, but the persecution actually helped send the gospel out. So if you look at Acts 8, 1 through 4, there, it says, Acts 8, 1 through 4, and Saul approved of their killing, On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout the Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. So a time of desperation. But Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. He dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. So that was actually a way of spreading the gospel, was persecution. Actually in Ethiopia, which was, Eritrea was part of that, back in World War II. All the missionaries left, and they thought the church would die. Mussolini took over, the Italians took over Ethiopia, and they really persecuted the church. But when the missionaries came back after the war, they found that the church had grown. I always think of that example of what happened during the time of Mao in China. There was this city where a church was making inroads and people were being converted, so the local authorities thought, we'll fix this. So they made everybody move to different parts of the country. Well, you can imagine what happened. They started house churches wherever they went. So the gospel spread, even though it was harsh, a time of desperation, and they were moved to remote places in China, but they started house churches. So let's look at the business of discipling. Again, Matthew 28, where he says there, starting with verse 19, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all I've commanded you. Teaching them to observe all I've commanded you. I probably had a wrong view of disciples, what disciples are when I was growing up. Maybe because the people that were converted under my father's ministry never had any influence in the cities or towns or villages where they were. So a disciple to me was somebody who was converted to Christ and then led this solitary life without doing anything else, not having any influence on, say, government or schools or the village life or anything around him. And I've always thought since then that maybe I didn't quite understand what a disciple was, because in Matthew 28 it says, observe all things I've commanded you. Well, the Bible's full of observe all things I've commanded you. Not just going out and witnessing to other people to convert them, but to make disciples. Tony Evans had a sermon on this chapter, and he says this: a disciple is a person who consistently operates under the rule of Christ, who makes decisions consistent with Christ's rule. That's why, by the way, people who were a threat to Rome, it wasn't that they were a threat because they wouldn't say Caesar is God. All they had to do is say Caesar is God. Really, they were a threat because every aspect of life was revolutionized from the way the Romans did life. For example, having a wife. It was totally different with the Romans. Children, you exposed them if they were on the hillside or in the rivers if you were not pleased with how they looked or whatever. Christians would pick them up and adopt these children. But that was what you did back then. How you treated your slaves. Bible has something to say about that. How you are honest or in your business or your life, how you respected the government. Every area of life was affected. It must have been a real threat to the Roman civilization. And it was a real threat to the way they were. Now, I was thinking perhaps that's why, say, in China today, with an authoritarian government, of why Christians are a threat to them, why they have 600 million cameras, I think it is, in China, observing everybody and keeping track of you and stuff under an authoritarian rule. because Christians are kind of a threat to that way of life. Why? Because Christians believe you do the right thing because of what's in your heart. And in China, you do the right thing because of the iron fist, right? I tell Chinese students, there's only two ways in life to keep your country together. It's either iron fist or the people that want to live the right way. And you don't necessarily have to be a Christian, because Japanese society works pretty well without that. Because of God's common grace to man, they're able to exist. For example, Tokyo, being the biggest city in the world, is one of the best cities in the world because of the Japanese way of life. But that's God's common grace. Other than that, I can't think of any other examples. You know, it's iron fist or what's in the heart. All right. Well, we're going through revolutionary changes today. Every aspect of life is being changed for us. Ephesians 1:22 kind of talks about that a little bit, about how everything should be. It says, and he put all things under his feet and gave him as head over the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. I need to speak to more theologians about this, but it's interesting to me that he was given authority at the time he was given authority. In my mind, it was before Christ became man. In essence, he was God, obviously, but when he put on a human nature and obeyed and died on the cross for our sins, it seems to me at that point he was given all authority over everything because of his obedience to God the Father. I have to do a deeper study of that. Unfortunately, I don't know Greek, but it seems to me that that's it. And now he has all authority over everything, over every aspect of our life. Well, we are going through revolutionary changes today in the West. Every aspect of life is being changed, and people are kind of shocked about that. So that always starts with disciples, though, of somebody. So I can trace for you all the changes that are going on in our society today, from marriage to what is a person, what is a man, what is a woman, marriage, every aspect of life, why work. Might be interesting for you to know that somebody is suing her parents because they didn't ask her if she wanted to be born. And so they need to support her for the rest of her life. Every aspect of life is being revolutionized. I can trace that back to a man and his disciples, actually. Hegel, in 1820 to 25, had disciples around him at the University of Berlin, and had a view of life, a secular view of life, that resulted in what we have today. One of his disciples in that class was Karl Marx, and others. Huge influence, and it kind of reverberates down through the ages until we have what we have here today as a revolution. So Christians are a threat to that. It is ironic that God works through different means that Satan is using in order to expand his kingdom. For example, think of the Roman Empire under Julius Caesar and then Caesar Augustus, or Antony and then Caesar Augustus. And, you know, what a threat that must have been, this mighty empire to Christians. Well, it's because they took over the whole known world at that time that Christians could travel everywhere from Spain to Galatia. You know, no passports needed, the protection of the Romans, stopping piracy and waylayers on the highways. You know, they controlled everything. And that's how the gospel spread. So to me, it's kind of ironic that the very internet that is corrupting so many in so many ways is also used by the Christians to spread the gospel. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple ways that's being done. One of the organizations that I support is called SAT7, SAT-7. You can go to sat7.org. And they were started up about 15 to 20 years ago with, hey, let's, this internet thing, let's see if we can do something with it. Today, they're such an organization that they figure 30 million people a day watch their shows. It's 24-hour programming in Turkish, in Urdu, and Arabic. And everybody under SAT-7, which is the satellite, is able to access that. And they have shows for women, they have schools for children, because there's hundreds of thousands of children that don't have schooling because of the wars, like in Syria and all. They're almost like rock stars to these kids. Hundreds and thousands of people text them, write them, people are converted, and then they have discipleship as well. How do you act as a Christian in these different areas? And also try to get them hooked up with other Christians in the area who also are under a regime that would execute them if they knew about it. So 30 million a day, 30 million people a day tune into these shows, all across everything from Turkey all the way to Morocco, all the way through Saudi Arabia, everything. And you must know, having seen pictures, that you can have a nomad's tent in the middle of the desert, and a little dish is there, and he has a TV, and he also has a cell phone. And you can get SAT-7 on your cell phone, and it can't be blocked because it's coming from a satellite. So in the middle of nowhere, this is going on. The other organization, of course, is the Crew, or what used to be called the Crusade, and the Jesus film. They have a film of Jesus, the story of Jesus, in over 1,700 languages. And you can imagine what people who are in the middle of nowhere with a language, India alone has like 700 languages and dialects. So you can imagine people who've never heard foreigners or some foreign film in their language, how that affects them. So these people that are indigenous workers go back country with these films, and now, unlike carrying massive equipment, they can just carry a little projector and a disc to put in and show the Jesus film on a sheet in the middle of nowhere. It's remarkable. And thousands of people are coming to Christ in various places in Africa and Asia because of these films, and because basically indigenous workers that are there. I also support something called Voice of the Martyrs. So a lot of indigenous workers are persecuted and martyred everywhere from Mexico to India. And so it is spread. Here's one woman smiling who family is terrorized by cartels in southern Mexico. And they just keep going anyway. In this magazine, talks about her and others. And so they also are having a huge effect. So missionaries going out from our country, it's very difficult to get people to go out anymore, a number of reasons, one of which is, of course, student debt. Missionary societies will not send you out to the field if you have massive student debt. So student debt takes you into your 30s, at least. And so how do you go out? There is an organization that helps that way, but for many, it's, you'll never be able to go out because of student debt. The other thing is the high cost of sending a missionary out. Maybe $100,000 a year, more if you go to Japan, other places. It's really high cost. So having indigenous people, local people be able to go out and put their lives on the line is really, really important in our age. So you can support these different things, and I'm not for taking your tithe to the church and redirecting it to something like that. I know somebody who tithes their salary, and then since they're on Social Security, they tie that to their special projects like this. So that's something that people do. Our tithe traditionally has gone to the church, who then vets different organizations and supports them, or we support missionaries from the church. But if you have a little extra project like Voice of the Martyrs or Jesus Film or Sat 7, maybe some extra tithes and offerings, maybe the offerings could go to something like that. So that's something you can do. So remember that we are all ambassadors as we go out this week. No matter what we're doing, we are ambassadors in whatever we're doing. So let's bow for prayer.